You know, I said in the last one of these that I was planning on doing more Battle Network content, what with the Legacy Collection coming out and everything, so... Wouldn't it be funny if I decided to pick one of the few games that isn't in the collection to do a video on? While the 6 core Mega Man Battle Network games are RPGs, with each one building off the next in terms of mechanics, the spin-off games released for this, already spin-off sub-series of the Mega Man franchise are incredibly strange in how they deviate from the main games. Battle Chip Challenge is something akin to an auto-battler, which makes me think it was secretly ahead of its time, having similar gameplay elements to most mobile gacha games you see nowadays. And on the other end of the spectrum, Mega Man Network Transmission, released only for the Nintendo GameCube, is a weird hybrid of Battle Network elements and the classic Mega Man action platforming formula, taking place between the events of Battle Networks 1 and 2, to, less than stellar results. While novel in concept, replacing the special weapons you'd normally get from defeating bosses with the timed custom gauge and chip selection system from the RPGs ends up dragging out the gameplay considerably. It's often that you'll find yourself sitting around waiting for the game to give you what you need, rather than actually being able to make progress. And of course, this is also without mentioning the game's notoriously bizarre difficulty curve, where early game bosses skill check you harder than late game opponents, as they're unable to keep up with your exponentially growing arsenal of battle chips and buster upgrades. However, it's because of that last point and the fact that the anime had a very apparent influence on this game in its music and visual design, that I wanted to once again see if Higsby was onto something in the show when he gave an 11-year-old copious amounts of explosives. While the game is going to be difficult from the start no matter which way we choose to play it, by limiting ourselves to one of the most unwieldy chip types in the game, perhaps we can make something a bit more interesting out of the rest of this mediocre Mega Man title. If you watched the last video I did covering Battle Network, then most of the rules there still apply, but there's a bit of new ground to cover due to a few changes we'll encounter here. Like last time, we'll only be using bomb-type chips for this run. This includes the mini-bomb chip, of course, as well as little bomb, cross bomb, and big bomb, which we should all be more than well acquainted with at this point. But I'll also be allowing 2 more chip families into our arsenal as they're technically bombs. These being the Tree Bomb and Magnet Bomb series of chips. Both of these being chips that function similarly to their neutral element relatives, but with a few key differences. The former has Mega Man Toss, a wood element seed that doesn't explode, much unlike the average tree in Earthbound, but will launch a wooden spike after it's been on the ground for a few seconds. Likewise, the Mag Bombs are Elec element chips that have Mega Man Toss a bomb that can paralyze most enemies should it not kill them, and in this game they linger around for a few seconds, much like the Tree Bombs. Otherwise, like with Battle Network 1, we're allowed to select non-bomb chips in our folder to get them out of rotation, just as long as we don't actually use them, and in a similar vein, making use of the Mega Buster here will once again be prohibited. Only other thing worth mentioning from there is that upgrades such as HP memories, mem-ups, and reg-ups are fair game for us to obtain as long as we don't use movement utility chips to obtain them, but the elemental armor system will once again be banned, just for the sake of making things more interesting. The last thing, and it's more of a clarification of the goal for this challenge, if I can avoid a boss fight or encounter, I am not obligated to beat them. Same applies to post-game bosses, as it's almost certainly impossible to meet the criteria for fighting all of them with bombs alone. So, that is to say, sorry for any fans of Base.EXE. Maybe if we get to Battle Network 3, perhaps? Anyway, with the rules of the challenge laid out, hello everybody, Stupid Studios in here, and today we'll be attempting to beat Mega Man Network Transmission using only bomb chips. So, without further ado, battle routine set! Execute! After a cutscene showing a falsified retelling of last game's ending, where Mega Man proceeds to dab and blast the life virus with an M-Cannon and Charge Shot combo, instead of the vastly superior Big Bombs, we're taken to Din Area 1, where we get our tutorial for this game. Thankfully, much like BN1, we aren't required to use the chips Lan wants us to. So after setting the mini-bomb as our regular chip and waiting for the custom gauge to fill up, we take out the Metars in front of us and make a little progress into the area. Since our usable chips don't reload until we jack out of the net, we're stuck using the 10 mini-bombs and 5 little bombs in our folder until we can find new bomb chips. This effectively gives us 15 shots to attack with, which is abysmal. Fortunately, the chip shop is open from the start of the game, and Higsby thankfully is stocked with mini-bombs in the initial inventory. So after grinding out enough Zinni in the starting area of the game, we're able to max out our mini-bomb count to 30, giving us a bit more to work with. It's still a bit of a trek to our first boss though, so we'll need to be a bit frugal with our bombs for now. And reaching Den Area 3, we find the place is on fire. Someone's been causing chaos without us, and you know we can't have that, so off we go to explode the culprit. The road ahead is incredibly tricky under our rule set though. Since we're trying our best to conserve ammo, damage boosting through some of the enemies here is necessary, as a good few of the Canadems are stationed in narrow corridors that prevent us from jumping over them. Regardless, a bit of careful weaving through most of the enemies along the way, and we make it to our first boss, and it's Fireman once again.
The flames of disaster!
Oh no, this might be a problem. Because we're not using the elemental armors, the heat armor roll gave us before entering the area is off the table. As a result of that, any attack from Fireman is a 2-shot kill, making for one hell of a first boss. We're going to have to figure out a serious strategy against this guy if we have any chance of progressing. We can slide under both his firearm attack with good timing, and also slide under Fireman's legs, but both come with their own risks. For dodging firearm, we need to slide towards Fireman right as the attack is coming out, while if we try sliding under Fireman himself, there's a good chance he will use an area of effect attack to hit us anyways. After extensive testing and experimentation with Fireman over the course of multiple sets of lives, I do work out a method for getting by relatively unscathed. Since Fireman attacks immediately after being hit by an attack that stuns him, in this case the bombs, by getting in close when he takes damage, we condition him to use the close range AoE attack, at which point we simply jump out of the way and repeat the process. So, a bit of precise movement and 8 mini-bombs to the face later, and Fireman is down for the count once again. After restoring Den Area 3 to normal, we can proceed through it to get to the global area, where the first thing to greet us here is the B-Tank virus. Taking the opportunity, we max out our little bomb count to 20, and then chase down the mysterious StarMan, who's been spreading a fake cure for the Zero virus, which afflicted Fireman earlier. After they unfortunately give us the slip, we pay a visit to our old pal Gutsman, who's also been infected by the virus. Thankfully, unlike Fireman, this fight doesn't require much effort on our part, as Gutsman's jumping attack makes it easy enough for us to lob bombs at him. From there, defeating Gutsman gives us a bit of freedom on how to approach the game, as this unlocks 4 stages for us to choose. Our first destination is the Garden Computer System, as this is where we'll be able to load up on Tree Bombs 1 and 2. As of now, these are the strongest ships we'll have access to, dealing 100 and 120 damage respectively. Taking care of a less than noteworthy encounter against Needleman, we move on to the next level. And going in order of weaknesses, since we have wood element chips, we go for the Shopping Computer next, which is predominantly hosted by electric viruses. This gets us Mag Bomb 1 and 2, but also forces us to fight against Brightman, which is our first taste of a boss in this game with a really annoying gimmick. While he's not attacking or jumping, Brightman is able to block our attacks and quickly counter with a fast-moving Bright Beam. Under normal circumstances, this would be fine, seeing as you can easily lure it out with a Buster Pellet and follow up with a chip attack. However, since there's an ending lag to throwing our bombs, we can't follow up with another one quickly enough before the boss raises their guard again. That said, Brightman isn't very proactive in attacking us on his own, so it's a bit of a waiting game for him to give us a window to attack. Thankfully, since he's an Elec Element Navi, he takes double damage from our tree bombs. So 3 really good hits from us, and Brightman succumbs to our explosive trees. Next on the chopping block is a return to the Waterworks computer system, and this one is hardly worth mentioning. Iceman doesn't have a counter, and our newly acquired mag bombs have Iceman melt quicker than a snowman jettisoned into an active volcano. But while I knew the first 3 stages would be simple enough, I was dreading the last of this group, the bank computer, before even starting this challenge. The stage makes use of the force beam traps from Mega Man 2, but honestly, they're really the only major hurdle this stage presents. Once we get to Quick Man, while we do end up dying a few times, we're able to find a pattern to lock him into and make quick work out of him. You know, for a boss so infamous in the classic series for being incredibly unpredictable, I'm surprised how straightforward that was. Though I can't help but shake an uneasy feeling that I've made a very, very dangerous foe. Well, I'm sure it's nothing. Either way, with that set of stages done, 2 more unlocked for us to tackle. I decided to go for the arcade first, and not much to talk about with this one, apart from the minor heart attacks Area 2 gave me while trying to collect HP memories in the Trampoline Room of Doom. We are able to max out our cross-bomb chips in this stage though, so woohoo! Even more firepower for us. As for the boss, since the returning Color Man is mostly stationary, no fancy tricks were needed to take them out other than basic avoidance of their attacks. And likewise, the power plant wasn't a major hurdle for us to overcome, at least with regards to the level itself. This is however where we end up getting Mag Bomb 3 added to our arsenal, leaving us with all but 2 of our available chips collected. Now, the boss for the level, Elecman, ends up being one of the bigger thorns in our side so far. Like Brightman who preceded him, he'll attempt to counter our attacks, but this time by giving us the classic, teleports behind you, nothing personnel, kid, in an attempt to drain our HP. Unlike Brightman, however, there are several factors that make this fight incredibly annoying to manage. For one, both of Elecman's attacks are more difficult to manage, with the lifesteal counter not being active long enough to give us a good window to fire off another bomb at the boss, and the second attack he can do does not require him to jump, meaning we have to actually aim our shot trajectory if we want to hit him in time. Not to mention, the second attack, Lightning Blaze, which calls out 2 storm clouds to move around the arena for a few seconds before striking down with lightning, can be chained to where multiple of them are on the field at once. This makes it incredibly annoying to both carefully line up a shot at the boss and to avoid the boss afterwards as he moves around like a Windows screensaver. In any case, a bit of patience and some careful maneuvering, and Elecman kindly short-circuits for us after he too experiences death by exploding trees. After beating Elecman, we're given access to Global Area 3 on the mainnet and 4 more stages from there in a linear order. It's kinda like the Wily Castle levels in the classic games, only with more unique level gimmicks and less wiggly eyebrows. Anyway, we take a quick detour to obtain a key item that'll let us get the good ending later, and begin taking on these stages. I'm going to skim past Old Area as it's not really much to write home about other than being our introduction to the Aura Head viruses. These guys will reflect any attack that deals less than 100 damage, so we'll need to deploy our elemental bombs for these guys specifically. Otherwise, Swordman is the boss here, and because he's flying, our bomb chips can actually be considered somewhat optimal for this fight, especially since there's no counterattack shenanigans at play. After that, though, we go to Strange Gravity Area, and it's at least a bit more interesting. Being a cross between Gravity Man stage from Mega Man 5 and Saturn stage from the Mega Man 5 where you fight planets, it makes our job a bit trickier, as the increased gravity in some sections mean we have to be a bit more quick on our feet to deal with certain viruses attacking us head-on, like the Canadum 3s and Mega Bunnies littered around the stage. Fortunately, this is where we get our second to last bomb chip, and the one with the best range out of all of them being the Big Bomb chips. While it's weaker in terms of raw damage than the tree and mag bombs, this one is going to be one of our better utility options for the rest of the run. As for Gravity Man himself, this is honestly one of the more entertaining bosses for this challenge, as because only the head can be attacked and Gravity Man is blocking the front with his massive spinning arms, our best way to fight the boss is to circle around him, weaving between the homing shots he fires off, and using the reverse gravity on the upper half of the arena to throw our bombs down at Gravity Man. It certainly makes for one of the more unique encounters this game has to offer, especially when most of them so far have just been some variation of waiting for the boss to stop minding their own business and then parrying when they attack. But anyway, while Land goes to admire his ever-growing collection of action figures of his fallen enemies, since you've made it this far in the video, as always, I'd just like to ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, to leave it a like and a comment down below to let me know your thoughts. Also, an update. Last time we discovered that a large percentage of our subscribers were being held captive by some stereotypical evildoer in their secret lair. Since then, I've been on the hunt for this fiend and have been working to receive intel from a nearby town where he was last seen enjoying a latte at a local coffee shop. That said, the source I've been working with has refused to share with me any of the information he knows, unless we're able to greatly increase our subscriber count by an undisclosed amount. I didn't think internet points would be able to be used as currency like this, but regardless, it's the only lead I have. So if you want to help me find where this supposed Dark Lord is hiding out, rescue those innocent viewers, and help the channel while you're at it, consider hitting that subscribe button. Anyway, on with the show! The next stage on our path is the No Gravity Area. It's a pretty basic water physics level, but it's got one of my favorite music tracks in the game, so it gets a pass for me. Like most water levels in these games, the path ahead is littered with spikes, but fortunately, aside from a tight jump here and there, getting to the end of the area isn't much of a hassle. The Orc viruses can be annoying since their yo-yos block your bomb tosses, but they're not really a major threat. Now, my train of thought as I was playing was that the stage would be an absolute cakewalk, but that would come to a screeching halt when I reached the mini-boss, and their name alone would go on to strike fear into my heart. Big Yoland. This was probably the most aggravating obstacle to overcome so far, as it's the most defensive enemy in the game we've encountered. Unlike the smaller York viruses, this enemy has 3 of the deflective yo-yos orbiting around it like a shield, while also firing out 2 homing missiles at a time to attack Mega Man. On top of this, it is also completely shielded except for the green core in the center. Now, since the neutral element bombs have explosions that linger for a second, you'd think it'd be as straightforward as attacking the boss as they're ascending and have them move into the hurt box, but you'd only be half correct. One detail I've neglected to mention at this point is that if an enemy deflects an attack, it cancels it out completely, meaning the explosion doesn't trigger at all. This presents a major problem, as it means we'll have to get creative with how we handle damaging them in the first place. damage boosting into the boss's hurt box is out of the question, as the knockback we receive, along with them continually moving, prevents us from being able to line up our shots accurately, and that really only leaves one other viable option for us. While the mini-boss itself deflects our attacks, the missiles it shoots out do not. If we are able to land a bomb toss on one of the missiles right as it's fired, as the boss is ascending upwards, we should have a shot at connecting with the hurt box at the core. We also need to use the big bombs specifically, as neither little bomb nor cross bomb have the necessary range to get this job done. And in order to repeat this process, we also need to have another bomb type at the ready to destroy the remaining missiles following us, so they're able to respawn. So after a brutally long wait to get exactly what we need to show up in our folder, we attempt to beat the mid-boss with this strategy in mind, and we fail spectacularly. While the plan sounds straightforward enough in theory, in execution we're still needing to keep track of the incredibly small hurt boxes of the missiles to aim our bomb tosses at, the direction the boss is moving in at any given moment, and the yo-yo shield, which is also able to get in our way on top of all of this. Oh, and our ammo count is also back to haunt us, as the big bomb chip only lets us carry 10 max in our folder, so we need to ensure these shots count. That said, we are able to get a hit in on the enemy during this first attempt, so I know it's possible to do. After much more waiting, we get another shot at the fight, and by some miracle, we manage to actually take it out. And right after that whole ordeal is the boss fight against Starman himself, the one who's been responsible for spreading the fake Zero virus here. Unfortunately for us, he's also a pain in the ass. He'll fly around the arena, and rather than counterattacking us when we attempt to hit him, Starman will simply teleport somewhere else. As for his attacks, Starman will either fire star arrows in the 8 cardinal directions, fire a cluster of shooting stars downward, or if he's at low enough HP, he can just decide, you know what, fuck you, and launch enough shooting stars at you to practically qualify as a screen nuke. Respectable, honestly. It's definitely a difficult fight, but we can't afford to game over here, as it would mean needing to go back to the beginning of the area and refighting the mid-boss, which would be devastating. So we'll need to bring our A-game here. Oh, you son of a... You know, I wonder why I put myself through this stuff sometimes. Oh right, entertainment value, of course. Anyway, we make it back to Starman, and this time I decide to play a bit more aggressively. I run out of MP midway through the fight and have to wait for it to recover, but thankfully, after some extreme luck, we finally catch Starman with enough bombs, and scrape by with just barely a sliver of health remaining. And, you know, despite the hell he just put me through, he's still my favorite Navi in the series. But we made it to the last stage for this gauntlet, the Zero account. This stage is probably the least interesting one in the game, as, for all intents and purposes, it's a straight shot to the boss. And if you haven't already gathered by the name of what's been making all the bosses we fought go haywire, or the heavy usage of the color red here, the opponent we're tasked with taking down is none other than the Battle Network counterpart of everyone's favorite Capcom fighting game top tier, Zero. You'd think Proto-Man.EXE being a red-clad swordy with long hair would keep him from weaseling his way into this incarnation of Mega Man, but I digress. For our challenge, Zero is probably the hardest Navi encounter we'll have to overcome. Much like a good number of the bosses before him, Zero has the ability to counterattack, of which he uses to incredible effect. The 3 main attacks Zero can perform include a basic 3-hit combo with the Z-Saber, a rising upward slash that can hit even if you're sliding, and a follow-up downward spinning slash if he's airborne. On top of this, Zero can rarely fire off a sweeping sword beam when he's at critical health. This covers the entire screen, and the only effective way to dodge it is if you have an invisible chip enabled, which, well, isn't a bomb. Oh, and this attack does 300 damage, which is just shy of half our entire health bar at this point in the run. It should also be said that all of Zero's main attacks have virtually no windup, and the long range of the Z-Saber ensures that, unless you're anticipating it and are roughly a third of the screen's distance away from him, you will get hit. Once more, this is a case where basic buster shots would be much more favorable to fight Zero with, as this at least force triggers the counterattack while giving us time to react, which the bombs do not grant us. Ultimately, the winning strategy for this fight ends up becoming a matter of out-damaging Zero with tree bombs while trying our best to keep our distance from him where we can. We end up running out of MP to keep tossing tree bombs midway through the fight, but luckily some good old-fashioned mini-bombs are able to help us close the gap and gently explode Zero just enough to have a chat with him afterwards. I'm sure the many versions of Zero out there are used to exploding at this point anyways. But yeah, you'd think with the main threat dealt with, we'd be done with the game, but nope. Someone had to create Zero in the first place, so it's our job still to violently uncreate them. Virtually, of course. So, the game continues, and we take a small detour to attempt the optional Proto Man fight, but after realizing it was just the Zero fight, only with faster attacks and Proto Man being able to teleport, I decide that no amount of doing it for the content would be worth getting repeatedly skewered on a fight that doesn't even get me anything more than a trophy in Land's room. Returning to the main story progression, we make our way through the legendary World 3 area, obtain the last tier of tree bomb chips, thus finally completing our collection of bombs, and we face off against Pharaoh Man. This one proves to be a more obnoxious encounter, as the coffins that the boss calls down occasionally summons ratons to aid the boss. Since the terrain is a flat surface, our bombs are much trickier to land on the ground-based viruses. Likewise, the Anubis statues Pharaoh Man can place down deal damage to Mega Man at regular intervals as long as it's on screen. Because of the limited weapon energy we have to work with, it can be tricky to micromanage chipping away at the boss with our more hard-hitting attacks, while attempting to stave off the passive DPS working against us with some of our less costly ones. Eventually, we are able to get an attempt in at the boss where he doesn't summon an Anubis statue until late into the fight, and while we do struggle to recover our weapon energy for the last hit, we're barely able to squeeze out a mag bomb strong enough to land the finishing blow, just before Pharaoh Man is able to make us succumb to the poison. And this leads into our penultimate level, being the Vacant World 3 comp. Despite Gutsman not making an appearance, his Classic Series counterpart's level gimmick returns here, and it's somehow even more obnoxious than in the NES game, despite the fact that falling off does not drop you like a lead weight this time around. Frankly, relearning the timings on these is where most of my death stemmed from, as the boss fight against Shadow Man to cap off the level was honestly a joke, as he makes the cardinal sin of attempting to attack from directly above, right within our blasting range. But now that the last of World 3's defenses are taken care of, Land and Mega Man piece together the key needed to delve into the Undernet, where our final level for the game takes place. The Undernet itself is just a narrow one-screen path spiraling around on itself and leading to our final boss. It's a treacherous road to the end, however, as a variety of elemental scuttle viruses guard the way. Their attacks vary depending on the element of the virus, but they deal a truckload of damage regardless, so best to be mindful of them. After carefully sniping all of the scuttles in our immediate path, we make it to the first of the bosses, the Firewall. There are 3 targets to note here, being the 2 turrets on the ceiling and floor respectively, and the central eye behind both, which is the boss's weak point. The top turret shoots Brightman lasers, while the bottom turret shoots a small pellet at regular intervals as it's constantly moving its aim up and down. Both are incredibly obnoxious to dodge, especially in tandem with the eye. Between dodging the 2 projectile sources from the top and bottom, the central eye is able to fire a large beam attack forward, which is easily able to intercept you as you're jumping. Oh, and this entire fight takes place while you're on a conveyor belt, constantly moving you towards a wall of spikes. Little bit overkill, but I can't deny that one contraption from SpongeBob armed to the teeth makes for a very solid security system. Making use of the tree bomb 3s we have, we're able to break the bottom turret, which results in the top turret starting to fire homing missiles akin to Big Yoland. Thankfully, after destroying that, the eye itself is no problem. Just a matter of waiting for our bombs to recharge and lining up our shots. As expected, with how many moving parts this fight has, it understandably took a few tries for everything to go right, however. Afterwards, though, comes a time-honored tradition of the Classic Series. It's time for the obligatory boss refight gauntlet. Luckily, our health and chip ammo are restored after the Firewall, though it's still a matter of waiting for our weapon energy to recover. Strange how the game was willing to show mercy, but only up to a point where it still minorly inconveniences us. Fortunately though, the game doesn't force us to fight every Navi in our journey, just everyone up to Elect Man. And on top of that, we're given checkpoints between fights, so it's eventually just a matter of overpowering the bosses using our stockpile of lives. That said, with the boss rush over, that just leaves the final obstacle in our way. The Life Virus R. Like the original Life Virus, this boss has a regenerating aura to chip through before we can damage it. However, this one functions a bit differently than its predecessor. Rather than temporarily going away when attacking, the life aura regenerates when the boss starts a new attack, and both it and the boss change elements to the attack being used. And because elemental weaknesses deal piercing damage through auras in this game, using Tree Bomb when it's Elect element and Mag Bomb when it's Aqua element will be our most effective means of dealing damage here. That being said, I made it to this boss with only 1 life remaining for an actual attempt at the fight, and considering how lethal and precise the attacks are to avoid here... This quickly became one of my least favorite sections in the game, almost topping that godforsaken yo-yo. Despite having a pretty clear-cut path to victory, since getting a game over sends us back to the start of the Undernet, this means we have to once again beat the Firewall, the boss rush, and then the Life Virus R in just a handful of lives. Along with needing to wait around 20 minutes total to adjust our chip loadout between each fight. The sheer precision required to dodge the Life Virus's various attacks, and needing to keep track of weapon energy consumption, this last stretch ends up being one hell of a gauntlet to get through. Regardless though, we're eventually able to deal the killing blow on the Life Virus... is Phase 1. Yep, this was a two-parter. Thankfully, Phase 2 is more of a victory lap than anything. This weird red dragon-looking form of the Life Virus just aimlessly drifts from one side of the screen to the other and drops slow-falling projectiles occasionally. Admittedly, this part had me incredibly tense as I was basically hanging on by a sliver of health after Phase 1, and I wasn't interested in finding out if I'd be forced to redo Phase 1 if I died, so I played this part as carefully as I could. After shaving off a few years of my life from narrowly surviving a purple blob to the face, I'm able to throw one last environmentally friendly explosive at the Life Virus, destroying it once again. So yeah, after an insurmountable amount of grinding, waiting, and a little bit of luck, I can safely say that it is entirely possible to beat Mega Man Network Transmission once again, using only bomb chips. Though the game was a slog in some places to make progress in, this was surprisingly more straightforward and, dare I say, more interesting to attempt than Battle Network 1's bomb-only run. In Battle Network 1, getting the later tiers of bomb chips resulted in a snowball effect where the game became more easy towards the late game, as you would simply throw big bombs at the centermost panel and delete everything with very little thought. Here, due to the 2D nature of network transmission and the lack of a 6x3 grid requiring chips to take on new effects than they would have in the numbered entries, the bomb family ends up retaining their power, but at the cost of stronger forms still being unwieldy to use. Not to mention that playing network transmission normally becomes an absolute joke towards the endgame, thanks to the Mega Buster being supremely powerful when maxed out, so having to actually manage resources and find openings in some bosses and enemies became a refreshing change of pace to the usual experience. Now, granted, at the end of the day, it's still network transmission, and many of the flawed systems here are just as, if not more so annoying to deal with than usual. It still takes an eternity for the custom gauge to recharge, and a sizable amount of the footage I recorded was just waiting around to find the bombs in my folder. My gripes with the mechanics aside though, this was an overall more interesting way to play network transmission, and I could see some interesting potential in trying this out with other chip groups in the future. Sword-only run, anyone? But anyway, I'll be looking forward to returning to the Mega Man series in the future, at any rate before Capcom decides to. And whatever I decide to do next, I hope you all look forward to seeing what I have in store. Until then, this has been Stupid Studios In, signing out. Ciao.